Hello, credit union executives. Welcome to See You on the Show, where we give you up-to-date information on how you can reduce risk, keep key talent, and take a strategic approach to your personal financial wellness. Hosted by me, Doug English, a certified financial planner and former credit union insider with ACT Advisors. My guest returning on today's episode is Maurice Smith. Maurice is the very recently retired CEO of a billion-dollar credit union. He is an engaging speaker, attorney, author, and board director. He's best known for his thought, authorship, and novel perspectives where he identifies blind spots, uncovers disruptive trends, and imagines new opportunities. In this episode, we discuss lessons learned from studying failure and how credit union leadership can use those lessons to protect and drive the credit union forward. Maurice, we are delighted to have you join us on See You on the Show once again, but this time, after 43 years in the credit union movement, I hear you're going to retire. What are you going to do next, Maurice?
Well, thank you, Doug. It's a pleasure to be here with you and to engage in one of my favorite topics, and that's credit unions. So you're right. I can't imagine how fast this 43 years have gone by. And so it's time for a new season for me. And so from our previous conversations, working with Navigate Forward, it's helped me think about what the new episode is going to be. So I will practice law part-time. I will spend some time, maybe hopefully with the engagements with some colleagues and other institutions that could use my services and experience. But probably more importantly, my wife says we're going to have fun whether I like it or not. So we have plans to do some traveling and seeing some of the world and hopefully learn how to have fun after 4 decades of working.
I think you've got the moves, Maurice. I think you're going to be able to have fun, and you've got a wonderful wife to help lead you in that direction.
Indeed.
In today's discussion, I want to talk a bit more about the work that you're planning to do and what your passion is. I know it to be in driving and supporting the credit union movement. Obviously, in the last couple of years, there has been incredible challenges, incredible pace of change in the entire financial industry. Maybe we're going to have a recession, massively rising interest rates and inflation. What do credit union leaders do in times like these?
You know, Doug, I think credit union leaders do what they always have done. So I have the advantage of having worked in the credit union movement for 4 decades. And throughout my career, I think, Doug, I've seen just about everything there is to see. So I've seen 5 recessions. So unless we're in a recession now, I would not have seen my 6th one. I've seen rising rate environments. I have seen inverted yield curves. I have seen the economy go up and down. I've seen trade imbalances. I think I've seen just about everything an economy can throw your way, except I have not seen a depression, nor have I seen negative interest rates in this country. This is our first pandemic, so that's a new one for me. But what gives me hope and what credit union leaders focus on all the time is the resilience of the movement of our institutions to be able to meet whatever challenges come our way. So we have colleagues here in our office who've never seen a rising rate environment throughout their entire career. And so as we think about where mortgage rates are today, and I'm reminded that my first mortgage loan as a young loan officer, the loan that I received, my wife and I received to buy our first home, the rate was 14%. And we were happy to get it. And so even though the economy changes, the world changes, and the environment becomes challenging from time to time, we have been through this before. And it's the purpose of credit unions to meet the needs of our members, no matter what the economy throws their way. So I think our leaders are focused on the things that they've always focused on. How do we take care of our members today, but also have an eye towards the future? And how do we adjust to the challenges that will arise?
And the future is coming at us at an increasing pace, right? That's the challenge. And I know that I think historically, credit unions used to engage in strategic planning on just an annual basis, right?
And that is correct.
How have you seen that change over your career?
We had that practice as well, Doug, and it felt more like a checking the box exercise. That in the fall of the year, we would gather the board of directors and the executive team of the credit union, and we would have an executive board planning session to talk about the future. We would map out what we wanted to try to accomplish. We would sort of reminisce about what occurred throughout that year thus far. But the world started spinning faster, and we realized that annual planning sessions were just not cutting it. So we started doing semi-annual planning sessions, meeting twice a year. Last year, I think we met 3 times, maybe 4 times this coming year, depending on what the new leadership wants to do as I'm heading into retirement. And so it's awfully difficult for us to predict what an economy, a society, member needs, competition is going to do 12 months out. It's so fluid. So I'm finding many credit unions are looking for more and more opportunities to set aside the day-to-day operation and think about the future and be more aspirational about their planning. But once a year is not enough time, not enough frequency for them to have that conversation.
Thank you for that. I know in your work consulting with credit unions in the strategic planning session or sessions that they're having, you have taken an approach that I hadn't heard before, which is really focusing on the failures that have occurred in and around the industry. So tell us a little bit about how that work goes, and then how do you learn the lessons from failure and use them to protect and drive the credit unions forward?
Thank you for that question, Doug. So I am a student of failure, and I come at this from different perspectives. So first of all, so if you have a conversation with me for any length of time, my father's name is going to come up in the conversation. The person whom I love and adored, we lost to cancer some years ago, but his voice still echoes in my mind. So my father would read the newspaper. Yeah, they had paper newspapers back then, and he would read it every morning from front cover to the back. And he said, Maurice, read the paper every day. He said, look at the good news stories, the successes and things like that. He said, those stories are fine to read, but pay particular attention to the stories about failure, a company that has gone on the rocks, a leader or an executive for a corporation that's made a fatal mistake, someone in society who's done something bad. He said, pay very close attention to those failure studies, because what they've done, these stories will give you a roadmap of what not to do. So failure is inevitable in business. And some organizations, some companies, some businesses just don't make it. Our responsibility as leaders and executives of our credit unions is to ensure that we are not on that list of failures. And so as I talk to credit union leaders about their organization, I think about failure and success as a binary question. You're either going to be successful or you're going to fail. To avoid failure, we have to understand how it occurs. So when I speak to other credit union leaders and or their boards of directors, I point out to them how failure occurs, what I have observed over the years, what the practice of law can instill in us to watch out for these potholes in the road. And to the extent that we can ensure that the credit union is a going concern, it will exist in the future, then that tells me that success is assured. So I focus on the failure side of the equation first. Let's go ahead and mitigate. Let's sort of move all of those opportunities out of the way. Then we can think aspirationally about what the credit union should be accomplishing.
In your work with the credit unions, what are the signs you see when you become concerned that an individual or an entity might be headed in the wrong direction towards failure?
Oh, Doug, I could go down that rabbit trail for a long time. So in many instances, when we see an organization fail, it was predictable and foreseeable. So lately in the news has been the failure of FTX, this cryptocurrency exchange. And so when I look at the news accounts, assuming them to be true, about how corporate governance was exercised at this corporation, it's no wonder, it's no surprise that they would end up where they are today. So let's focus on credit unions and why would a credit union fail? So NCUA produces what is called a material loss review, and it's conducted by the Office of Inspector General. So when a credit union fails, this is not a merger, this is a liquidation. When NCUA has come in to take over, they basically write an epitaph, a postmortem on why did we have to go in and what happened. And sometimes these reports are critical of the management team or they're critical of the board. Some cases they're critical of the NCUA examiner who did not spot the trouble spots in the beginning. And so by reading those reports, you get a sense of there's a theme here of what happens with failure. And in nearly every instance, it's been a failure of corporate governance, of the board doing what is reasonable for a board of directors to do, and also for a management team performing its reasonable responsibilities as well. So I mentioned earlier that I'm a lawyer. And so the practice of law gives me the opportunity to read court cases on other failures, corporations, sometimes individuals, sometimes governments, what happened. And there's common themes to these failures. So if you understand what the symptoms are, then if you find yourself, your personal self, or your credit union as a corporation headed showing these symptoms, these problematic symptoms, then you get this canary in a coal mine warning that, wait a minute, we're heading down this dark path that doesn't work out well for most people who head down this path. So my role is when someone asks me to help them think about strategic planning, I say, okay, let's eliminate all the risk and let's try to let's dispense with all the kind of things that will create failure. Then we can talk about the success side of things. And I find that to be a healthier conversation for the institution because it doesn't do you any good to be aspirational in what you want to do if at the end of the day you're heading toward a waterfall.
Yeah, I think that's a really important aspect of it is that it's not like you're coming into an engagement with an organization under the idea that, okay, we're going to engage together and study failure and just look at failures and what a great feeling you're going to have after we did that all day. What I'm hearing you say is the idea is to you're a student of failure, so you kind of know and identify what the behavior patterns are that would tend to lead a credit union toward failure, and you seek to eliminate those things, and then I assume really focus on the aspirational outcomes. Is that right?
Absolutely. So, Doug, when you read someone's failure story, whether it's a corporation, whether it's an individual, it's important, I think, to try to get to the source of the failure. So let's say you happen upon a story, and let's use a tree as a metaphor, and someone falls off the branch of the tree. You say, okay, is that where the failure occurred? Perhaps the failure actually occurred when they actually climbed out on that limb before they reached that branch. Well, maybe the failure occurred when they climbed up that trunk of that particular tree. Maybe the failure occurred when they decided to go in the forest. When did it happen? So what news accounts will often give you is the spectacular end to a journey. And if you think about, well, how did we get here? And you start reverse engineering the transactions that led to falling off that branch, inevitably it will come back to this was a corporate governance failure where the board members or the directors or the leaders of the organization did not apply their responsibility on their duty of care, of their duty of loyalty, or the fiduciary responsibilities we have to act in what the court says is a reasonable way. And I know it seems kind of nerdy to have these kind of conversations, but if you get the basic blocking and tackling to corporate governance down, some of the harder decisions that you have to make later will become much easier for you. And then we don't find ourselves out on the branch someday.
I read the credit union trade magazines, and I would tell you that I don't often see stories of, obviously the press likes to write about bad things, right? The bad news sells, but I see a lot about mergers and seems like one after the other of a smaller credit union into a larger. And I assume that wouldn't be defined as a failure, but how would you imagine your consulting work like helping a credit union deal with that situation where they're maybe need to reconsider their direction? Because that's a tough one, right? It's incredibly.
It's extraordinarily so. So first of all, we can't look at a merger transaction from a distance and know whether it was a success or a failure. The merger is a transaction only. But what led an institution to head down a merger path could be various stimuli that created that opportunity or that lack of opportunity for them. So there are instances where a credit union will merge with another one because they're looking for ways to expand their ability to serve their membership. And it's very aspirational, and it's a productive transaction. Occasionally there are mergers where the institution is failing, and they basically, the merger is a life raft, be able to resuscitate the services to the membership. So for those instances where a credit union merges, cease to exist, and they're going to be absorbed by some other institution, and it was a shotgun wedding, they did not want to go through with this. It was not their choice. And I think it's important to understand what led them to that outcome in the beginning. And if we understand that, and if we understand what the symptoms are, if we start exhibiting those symptoms ourselves, either as individuals or as a corporation, we get a warning sign of, okay, wait a minute, we should stop and think about this. I get my annual physical with my doctor, and he checks my cholesterol and heart rate and all kinds of different ways he pokes me. And I imagine the reason why he does that, because if he sees that I'm exhibiting some symptoms that other people have exhibited and it did not work out so well for them, he has an opportunity to say, Maurice, what you're doing here isn't going to be healthy for you in the long term. So let's talk to you about some of the risk that you are taking. I think the same thing can apply for credit unions and leaders as well.
Do you have any stories that you could share with our listeners about some examples of these sorts of things, of ways that could have been foreseen that were not foreseen? Anything come to mind?
Yes. So let me share with you my trepidation about failure. Or maybe that's not the right word, but mostly my fear of failure when I became a CEO 22 years ago. So it was in late 1999, the board of directors of LGFCU, Local Government Federal Credit Union, asked me to be the incoming CEO. My predecessor was retiring. And the first thing I thought is I would very much like to not screw this up. You know, so it can't be too philosophical about that, Doug. I want to get it right. So I took it upon myself to call about 5 or 6 CEOs of credit unions that I knew personally and whom I had high respect for, and I believe they were doing a good job. And I asked them, would you give me some advice? I'm new into the role. I don't want to make a mistake. Tell me what I should do. And so they gave me a series of advice that was consistent among all the various conversations that I were having. I then took it upon myself to call 4 CEOs whom I knew relatively well, who I hadn't heard or knew had been fired from their job as a CEO of a credit.
You knew 4 people that had been fired from CEO jobs?
I did. Maybe it was luck of the fate here, or I just hang out around with the wrong people. I don't know what the reason for it is, but I called them at home and I asked them to give me advice on what not to do. 1 hung up on me, but 3 had a conversation with me. And they said things like, Maurice, never get too far ahead of your board of directors. Don't hide information from your board, because if you surprise them too many times, that doesn't work out well for you. Never get in the position where you think you're smarter than your board, because that's going to reflect and is going to show in your dialogue, your presentation to them, and how you respect them or don't respect them. Be transparent with your colleagues, your staff members. Make sure your door is truly open to members to come in, to challenge you, to question your decisions. And what I took from that is, if we ever get to the point that a leader feels like, or the folks around a leader can't question him, then who's to tell the emperor when he doesn't have clothes on? And so I will let anyone challenge me and question decisions that I've made. It could be the landscape person, the administrative assistant, the janitor, the executive vice president. If you have a challenge to me of some decision that I've made, bring it to me. 1 or 2 things are going to happen out of that conversation. I'm going to either be found to be wrong, and you're giving me a gift of an opportunity to do a course correction, or I'm going to find out that, wait a minute, I'm on the right path and I have an opportunity to convert you and change you to a different way of thinking. So having these conversations with individuals who succeeded and not succeeded, I've continued to have those over the years. when someone would give me an audience and allow me to ask them a few questions. And I would do that today, even with just 1 week to go in my employment. I'm still learning, and I still want to hear from individuals who have something to give to me that's going to make me a better person overall.
The 43 years in the credit union business, with 22, half of that as CEO. So you're now the person on the other end of the call, not of the failure, of course, but the new CEO at local government and other CEOs throughout the country have probably made the call to you for the lessons.
They have.
What have you been, you already gave some of them. What other 43 years of learnings have you offered to them that you can share with our listeners?
That's a good question, Doug. So I'll share a few pointers that I've passed along to colleagues about what has worked for me. So one of the advice from one of my friends I believe was a successful CEO is that I had to be my authentic self. Don't act like some other CEO or some other leader because I'm just going to be a second class copy of that person. Be authentic to myself. And so the way I engage with my board and my team around here is to ensure that this is something that's comfortable for me and hopefully feels comfortable for them. So we have this principle here that the answer to every question is yes. So if my board should ask me, Maurice, can the credit union do XYZ? Answer is yes. Can we conquer that market over there? Answer is yes. Can we offer that service? The answer is yes. The answer is always yes. Now, yes often comes with conditions or proviso. Well, assuming we can afford it, assuming that the market will support it, assuming we have the operational competency for it, or assuming that we get a statute or regulation changed that allow us to do something. So by starting the answer with yes on the question, it opens up the opportunity to have a debate and a dialogue about how to make it work. When your immediate answer is no to a question to your board, it forecloses all other conversation. It shuts it down. There's no opportunity for innovation, for mitigation, for thinking it through, for strategy. No is a period to the debate. I don't know any board that wants a CEO or a leadership team that's going to always say no to every idea they raise. And sooner or later, the board's going to look for somebody who's going to say yes to them. So I tell colleagues, start with yes. Then talk about the conditions that it takes to make that effective, but always give your board the due respect to honor the question or the suggestion they have and see how you can work it out. Sometimes yes may not come to fruition for 20 years until the technology and the market and regulations and things change, but your board know that you are looking for positive ways to accomplish that. I've told colleagues in the past to always be transparent with your board. I am brutally transparent with them. They know what I'm thinking, how I think about matters. I want to know what they think. Doug, my favorite day of the month is board meeting day, when the volunteers who give their time freely to come in to take care of the business of a credit union cooperative for their fellow members. Right now, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. When they come into this place and they are helping us make the best decision for their friends, family, and neighbors, that's a really, really good day for me. I have seen institutions who have failed or leaders who failed because they lack focus about what it is they were to accomplish. So I tell new colleagues, be hyper-focused on the purpose of your organization. Distractions will pull leadership away from the center. And when they do, then that will take you away from what's going to make you successful in the long term. So to the extent that someone's willing to ask me for advice, I have lots of advice I would give them. It's up to them to filter that advice and decide what works for them and how could that be helpful on their journey.
I love that imagery, goosebumps of excitement, not trepidation, but of excitement on board meeting day.
I love it.
That could be your the outcome for your consulting work. When you're really aligned with your board, that's how you'll feel about board meeting days.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
That's the outcome. Well, 43 years in the credit union movement and just tremendous success and legacy and respect throughout the industry. I hope that the credit union movement will continue to have you at some of the various educational sessions. Maybe you'll get some of your legal work to provide CE credit for those that need employees in the industry. That would be an interesting outcome. And then, of course, your consulting work on board governance can hopefully help credit unions thrive in the future. I know you worry about credit unions and the what would the epitaph read for a credit union if it was to fail. What are your thoughts about that?
I have lots of thoughts on that, Doug. So today, there are approximately 4,900 credit unions in the United States. And when I came into the credit union movement in 1979, there were roughly 18,500 credit unions thereabout. At our peak, at our height, I think it was 24,000 credit unions in the early 70s, the most we've had in the United States. The last time we've had less than 5,000 credit unions in the US was 1943. So if we look at just the trend line, we're heading towards less than 4,000 credit unions someday. And some of the academics will tell you perhaps that we may plateau around 3,000 or so. I don't know that for sure. But to see the decline in the number of credit unions, by the way, which is also happening in the banking industry as well. So this is not just a symptom of our movement. Consolidation is happening in so many other industries. To me, it takes something away a little bit from the soul of the movement when we've consolidated the governance into larger institutions. And I don't mean that to be a criticism of the larger credit unions, but credit union cooperatives, one of the values we have for our membership is for the active participation in the governance of the organization. So I know who the board of directors are. I see them at the grocery store. I see them at church or the local parks. They are in my community. They know my community. They know my pains. They know what opportunities exist in my neighborhood. But when the governance of an organization, virtue of its size, has moved to some faraway land, that I, as a member, might feel a little disconnected to the active participation in my own cooperative. Maybe that's progress, and maybe that's just a natural way that consolidation works. But to me, it feels like it takes a little bit away from just that member participation in their own organization. So, having said that, then it's important for credit union leaders today to be mindful of the distance now that's being created from the policymaking side of the institution and the member side of the institution. That the board members don't live in the communities where their members are. They don't frequent with them at the local high school football game on Friday. They don't get to see them. So it's important for boards to recognize we might have some blind spots here toward the members' needs. And so I've encouraged boards and management teams to make sure you don't lose focus of the key stakeholders of your credit union. Engage with them, be involved with them, set smaller advisory panels and committees, if you will, focus groups. Be overly open to an engagement opportunity with your members. Because if you do that, then I think a lot of why folks join credit unions at the beginning will be able to hopefully preserve some of that philosophy and some of that culture.
Awesome. That is wonderful advice, Maurice. And wanted to say thank you for your service to the credit union movement for the last 43 years. I know you've made a tremendous difference for a lot of families in a lot of different ways. And I think that's an awesome story in itself. So let's just, I guess, I'll open it up to you for any final thoughts for our listeners about anything else that they should think about with regard to failures in the credit union movement, with board governments going forward, or the remaining states that Maurice has not yet been to.
So yes, we have 4 states to visit. So we're going to try to get to those by the summer. And then we're going to buy an SUV and take some epic road trips around the country. Doug, people I've met around this country, in and outside the credit union movement, we're all the same. We have the same ambitions and the same drives and the same love. We care for our families. We want a safe neighborhood. We want opportunity to thrive, and we want to be able to practice a discipline that's important to us. We want to matter. We want to be remembered for doing good things in the world. So regardless of what state you're from, what religion you practice, what culture you identify with, we all want the same thing for ourselves. I can't think of any other place that sort of engenders that kind of philosophy than the credit union cooperatives that are made up of people And our whole purpose for existing is to help people live their better lives. I love this business. I have known almost all my life this is what I wanted to do with my life. And to have had an opportunity for 43 years to engage with members, to meet people like you and folks who work in credit unions and trade associations and QSOs and volunteers and professionals, and to be able to be part of this ecosystem, to hopefully to provide it some input, some contributions. It's been a gift to me, and I am taking way more from it than I have given to it. So going forward, I may be a little bit of an outsider, not working for a credit union, but I'm still a member. I'm a member of several credit unions. And I believe that I have a voice that hopefully can matter to somebody someday. And if it does, I welcome a phone call to have that conversation to see how perhaps my insight might be useful to help them spot issues that might create challenges for them in the future. But to the extent that I can be helpful in the future, I will be someone's beck and call, and my door is open to that. But this has been a dream occupation and a dream lifestyle for me, Doug. And I thank you for the opportunity to allow me to share a few stories with you and your audience.
Well, thank you, Maurice. It was great hearing from you. And I know that hopefully they're in retirement, you'll have as much success doing exactly what you want to do and finding fulfillment from your engagement with credit unions, as well as your remaining 4 states. And then, of course, going back and seeing the other 46 states many more times, right? With your epic road trip.
Many more times.
Awesome. All right, Maurice, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
That's all the insider credit union knowledge we have for this episode. Are you enjoying the conversation? Be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts with other credit union leaders by leaving us a review. See you next time on See You on the Show.
The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual security. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. Indexes are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly.